Hey friends, finishing up the week with Joseph. Just about halfway through the story, and hope you've enjoyed yourself so far. So last time when we talked about Joseph, Joseph had been forgotten about. Remember, Joseph was sitting in prison after being kicked out of Potiphar's house for doing nothing wrong, and he met the cupbearer and the baker for Pharaoh, for the Pharaoh of Egypt. And Joseph interpreted their dreams, which didn't end well for the baker, but it did end well for the cupbearer. And Joseph had a request of him. He said, "Please don't forget about me." And so the cupbearer gets set free. He goes and he serves Pharaoh again, and he forgot about Joseph for 2 years. 2 years go by. Joseph's still in prison. The cupbearer, over those 2 years, he does not think about Joseph at all, the guy who interpreted his dream. But after 2 years, something happens with Pharaoh. Pharaoh wakes up one night and he is incredibly disturbed, and he's just on edge. And the reason he's on edge is because, guess what he had? He had some dreams, and he was sure that they meant something. And so he asked all of his smart guys in Egypt, "Can you tell me what these dreams mean?" So he shares the dreams with them, and they just, "We have no idea, buddy. Maybe you just had something bad for dinner." I don't know if they actually said that, but they couldn't interpret the dreams. And this is upsetting to Pharaoh. I mean, he's very, very upset. And guess who catches wind of Pharaoh being upset about not being able to interpret his dreams? The cupbearer. And he comes to Pharaoh and he says, "Excuse me, sir. I just remembered something. 2 years ago, when I was sitting in prison, there was a guy in prison. And I had a dream, and I was feeling upset, kind of like you are, and he was actually able to interpret the dream. And I wasn't the only one in prison who had a dream. There was another guy in prison who had a dream, and the guy who was in prison, he interpreted that guy's dream, and both of his interpretations were spot on. Both things happened, and I'm wondering if that guy is still in prison. It's been 2 years, but if he's still in prison, maybe he can interpret your dreams." And so Pharaoh is very desperate right now, and so he invites Joseph to come out of prison, and he gets all cleaned up, and he takes a shower and maybe throws on some cologne or something like that, and he comes in front of the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh is just probably looking him over like, "I don't know about this. I don't know that there's much hope here," and Joseph, this is like his one chance to get out. I mean, if he does something really good here, maybe now things start to turn around for him. And so he goes in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh looks at Joseph and he says, "I hear that you can interpret dreams." And do you know what Joseph said? "No." He said, "No, I can't." Like, really, that's what he said. He told Pharaoh, no, I can't, which I think was really, really risky for him to say. Because that's his one shot. And Pharaoh, we don't know if he's a patient man or not, but I think he put his life at risk. But no wasn't the only thing he said. "No, Pharaoh, I can't. But," he said, "but God will give you the interpretation." When Joseph had an opportunity to shine the spotlight on himself, he didn't. He chose to shine the spotlight on God instead. And there's a passage in the Bible that really defines that as the purpose of our lives. It says, whether we eat or drink or whatever we do it all for the glory of God, to give glory to God. And that's basically a biblical way of saying we shine the spotlight on God. Is that the goal of our lives isn't to get people to look at us. The goal of our lives is to get people to look at God. And again, you might wonder, looking at the life of Joseph, well, why would he want to do that? With all the things that God had allowed him to go through. God had allowed him to be sold by his brothers and be in the hands of slave traders and get thrown into prison and then sit in prison after he was doing the right thing. Why in the world would he be so quick to shine the spotlight on a God who allowed those bad things to happen? And you might think that in your life too. Why should I be so quick to shine the spotlight on a God who allowed cancer to come into our family, who allowed the car accident to happen, who allowed the bad news to come, who allowed the job to be lost, who allowed the kids to go off in a direction that was really dangerous, who allows crime and shootings and all those different things? Why should we be so quick to shine the spotlight on him and say, "Man, what a glorious God that is"? Well, maybe at least in part because of how the rest of the story turns out. So Pharaoh told Joseph his dreams. There were 2 of them. And Joseph said, "You had 2 dreams, but they have the same meaning. And God gave you 2 dreams because he wanted to impress upon you how serious this is." And the number 7 comes up quite a bit of times in both dreams. And the meaning of the dreams was this. is that for the next 7 years after that, the harvest was going to be abundant in Egypt. Like they're overflowing with food. So much, they would hardly know what to do with all of it. So it would be 7 good years. But then after the 7 good years, there were going to be 7 really, really bad years where you wouldn't be able to harvest anything. No food would be coming in. And God was telling Pharaoh, you should plan ahead for the sake of not only the people in Egypt, but the people all around the world, because Egypt was kind of like the center of the world at the time. You need to plan ahead. And Pharaoh's thinking, yeah, that's right. If this is true, and he was convinced that it was, which is good because it ended up happening that way. There were 7 good years and then 7 really, really bad years. Pharaoh's like, we got to make plans. And he said, who can I put in charge of this? Who is wise enough to oversee the collection of and storage of food for 7 years, and who is reliable enough and trustworthy enough that they will distribute it evenly and equally and fairly to anybody who comes asking? And then he looked right in front of him. And who was right in front of him? Joseph. The guy who had been through all the crummy stuff. The guy who'd been forgotten about. But now the guy who was basically the second most powerful person on the planet. That's why we shine the spotlight on God. Because he doesn't forget about us. Because our stories always have a good ending. Joseph's did, and this isn't the end of it. We'll pick it up again next week and talk more about Joseph. But God doesn't forget about us. And he doesn't forget about you either. No matter how many times we're tempted to believe that he does. Hey friends, thanks for watching the videos. If you'd like to watch more, just click here to subscribe. And if you do, Pastor Jared Oldenburg is going to take you downhill skiing because he loves to go downhill skiing. Even though last time he went downhill skiing, I think he hurt his leg. But he promises not to hurt your leg.